Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Good Stuff. I'm Kevin Billy, and as always, we appreciate you spending some time with us today. As you're watching here on YouTube, if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. We would really appreciate it. And if you follow us anywhere on the social media platforms, hit that notification button so that you see the posts throughout the course of the week. Well, hey, today I'm elated to be joined by a former college football coaching legend and current president of Youngstown State University, Jim Tressel. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning, Kevin. It's good to be on any discussion that begins with the thought that it's good stuff.
Yeah,
Because the world needs good stuff.
I like it. I like it. Well, hey, start out by just telling us a little bit about your family. You know, I told you before, my uncles played for your father at BW. I learned a lot about that. You know, just hearing some of those things. What did you learn from your parents and your upbringing? You know, what was that like to be a coach's son? Did that really impact who you are and what you did as a coach? So just kind of fill us in on that, if you would.
You know, it really did. And I think so many of us that are blessed to have a great family background. Uh, I always like to say that the thing that the human uh, is most able to learn from is example. And if you're in a family that has the proper example, you have a head start. And you know, you and I, Kevin, have both worked with young people who, uh, coming up, didn't have the example, and they started out a little bit behind,
Hmm.
and it took a little bit of time to, and that's why coaches and teachers and pastors and mentors are so important for people, especially the ones that didn't have that head start, if you will, with a family background. And we were fortunate. My dad was a coach. My mom was a community leader. I mean, she was every day she was doing something for someone else. Unbelievable example. But really, it went deeper than that. My grandfather on my dad's side was a farmer, and some of the greatest memories we had was we'd get dropped off. I had two brothers, and they would drop us off 1 week at a time, and you'd have your work week on the farm, and you learned the example of hard work. He was a dairy farmer, so there are no days off on a
Yeah.
dairy farm. He was a butcher. He had his crops. He had his sheep. He had his chicken. And the example was, you worked from sun up to sundown, and that was, what it was all about. And so my dad happened to venture off into the education world. His siblings continued in the farming world, and so we got to watch aunts and uncles who worked like crazy, and um, growing up on campus. I was lucky. Talk about example. Our home at Baldwin Wallace College was on the campus.
Mm.
In those days, um, they didn't pay small college faculty or coaches very much, but they did provide housing on the campus because they wanted the faculty around the students. They wanted that environment of example and family and availability, and those types of things. And so we grew up right next to the football stadium. So I got to go to my dad's work every day,
Yeah.
and I got to see the example of those college kids when I was a elementary kid, and I got to see the way they carried themselves, how hard they worked, and all of the things that, and I got to see such a variety of people. Uh, Sometimes you grow up in a kind of a myopic area, maybe your own little culture or your own little neighborhood, your own belief systems, whatever. But when you're on a college campus, you're with kids from all over the place, all races,
Right.
genders, belief systems, preferences, you name it.
Mhm.
And so, such an advantage, to grow up in that environment. And I say every day, or if I don't, shame on me, is how blessed I was, to be placed where I was with the
Right.
people that I got to learn from, and I think that's why I wanted to go into education, because I wanted to do for others what had been done, on my behalf.
Yeah, for sure. And I kind of had to chuckle because I just mentioned those two uncles, and I remember baling hay with them when I was younger. And, my grandfather with the dairy stuff. And, now
Yeah,
living in Holmes County, I see it every day. It's a
right.
bubble, but it's definitely the culture.
It's a
You
great
know,
example.
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. You're amazing to me at managing yourself and having that calm demeanor. That's difficult for somebody like me. I'm a little bit more emotional. But for people that are listening, how do you do that? And then what's the best way that you continue to stay or remain grounded and humble?
Well, I think it goes back to that example again. My grandfather, who was a farmer, was very uh, calm about the fact that nature determined whether or not they were going to have any success on the farm, and he wasn't going to get stressed out and be mad at nature or whatever. My dad, as a coach and as a teacher and as a father, in fact, today's my father's birthday, uh, and he
Nice.
would be 96 if he were living today, and but his nature was one of focus, calm. Um, he was a man of very few words. Um, I probably got my mom's side of it. I gab a little bit more than my dad. But just seeing the way he went about things. Um, and then I really studied from coaches that I admired. Um, and, I guess I grew to believe that in the heat of the moment, whether things are going the way you want them to, or you think it's the referee made the right call, or whatever, or your player did the right thing that you hopefully instructed them or not, um, wasting any time and energy on emotion uh, and consternation, I always found was counterproductive. You should be thinking about, what do we need to do at this moment going forward, and not lamenting, uh, what happened 10 seconds ago. And
Right.
so now there's times when all of us get, to our limit, and it, we maybe lose that focus, get distracted by the emotion, but it's something that I think you intentionally have to work on so that you can stay focused on the task at hand.
Do you think this is why, or I guess maybe why did you always have, and probably still do with the people you were with, a great deal of intention with character development of your players?
You know, I think the example that I saw growing up was that certainly my dad wanted to win games, and he was highly competitive and very successful and so forth. But it was very apparent to me that what he was really uh, in the business of was helping his players grow and caring for them, whether it was playing in the game or in the classroom or how they behaved in the community. Um, and so to me, that was just part of what the process was. I just finished a great book that your viewers I would recommend to. It's called A Time to Build, and it's written by Yuval Levin, and he talks about the institutions in our country that perhaps have let us down a little bit, and that some of our institutions maybe have become a little more performative and goal oriented and winning oriented and so forth versus formative. That I think about sports, and I think about I'm 100 years old, so when I was playing sports, they didn't have football playoffs. Uh, you played 8 or 9 games. Uh, you played multiple sports. You didn't have all year round, traveling leagues and all-star teams and AAU teams and all that kind of thing. Um, you were playing the game to derive the values that the game gives you. I don't care which game it is. The hard work, the discipline, the teamwork, the handling adversity, the ups and downs, all the things that you could use later in life was why you played the game. And, uh, we may have lost a little bit of that, and it's become a little bit more, can I get a scholarship, or can I be recognized, or can I go be a millionaire, or, whatever it happens to be. So I know growing up that my dad's teams, maybe it was important to him to win, but I could see it was much more important to him to prepare his students for the rest of their lives. So that obviously became a huge part of what we tried to accomplish.
Right, right. Yeah, that makes total sense. Do you feel that, let's say that you're, and I know, like you mentioned, you really good there with all the shift in the times and whatnot. But would it have been different for you or anybody else? Like even now, if somebody starts at a bigger school compared to a smaller school, I feel that there's a little bit of a difference there, at least in my experience, that it was a little bit more personal at that smaller school. And maybe that some of those bigger schools, there is an emphasis placed on the winning and losing. Do you think it's different in that sense? Or because you got that small school atmosphere, that's all you knew and you were able to engrave that as you went along, even into some of those big schools. Does that make sense what I'm saying there, coach?
No, it does. I think, um, as time changed, um, Woody Hayes last year as the head coach at Ohio State, he made $40,000.
Jeez.
Well, so the whole um, business of sport has changed.
Yeah.
Well, all of a sudden, when there's business, it's different. And so I think the larger schools became a little bit more business oriented more quickly
Yeah.
because the numbers were so big. And um, all of a sudden, we have 24-hour a day ESPN and CBS Sports and et cetera, talk radio, all that. It became so prominent and so popular. When I was coming out of college, I went to Baldwin Wallace, and there were maybe three of us that wanted to go into teaching and coaching, because there was no money in teaching and coaching,
Right.
and most of my buddies wanted to go into business and, those kinds of things. And now you bump into kids all the time. They want to go coach because you can make millions of dollars. They want to go be in the NFL. So people, I think maybe even at the huge schools, uh, 50 years ago, didn't look at professional athletics the way it's looked at now. In fact, most of the people in the probably all the way up through the 60s, they had full-time jobs half the year when they were in the NFL.
Yeah.
Because NFL didn't pay them. Athletics wasn't that big a business. And so I think just the natural progression of how popular sport has gotten has changed in some ways the way people put the pressure on performance,
Right.
rather than formative things.
Yeah.
And it's, and I think that horse is out of the barn. It's not going to change anytime soon, I don't think. But I think there's been an interesting evolution.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I'd be curious to know, and I'm sure you've been asked this numerous times, but how did coaching prepare you to be a president, of a university? And then what would you say are the differences, the noticeable differences? Because I'm sure there's a lot of similarities, but what are some of the noticeable differences in coaching versus that administration or education, if you will?
Well, one thing that in coaching, or you grew to learn in coaching, is that you had to master the craft. You had to know the X's and O's. You had to know the training. You had to know game management, all those different things. Um, so I was able to take that understanding that you have to master the craft in when I became a vice president at the University of Akron for 2 years. I mean, I studied the industry. I mean, I just listened to podcasts. I read books. I talked to people who did it because I had spent 37 years in a very myopic part of higher ed, which was athletics. Um, and I wasn't a part of the big picture. And so I had to go in and learn the business, and I'm still learning the business. That's why I constantly want to hear from my students. Number one, I want to hear from my faculty. Number two, I want to hear from our administrative staff and employees. I want to learn. And that's what you had to do as a coach. You had to be learning every day. You had to know what was important to the kids you were coaching. You had to know what the competition was doing and so forth. The dissimilarity, well, and let me back up. The other similarity is it's still trying to get people to work together. I mean, that's what it is. I don't care
Right.
what you're a part of. If you can't get your people working together for a common cause, it's hard to be as successful as you can be. Now, the dissimilarity that I learned very quickly was that it was just so much larger. I used to have 100 players and a dozen coaches, and we had a common goal. We were with one another, you know, 16 hours a day. We got to know and love one another, and it just, it was a big family. Well, then you get to a situation like ours here. I have 12,000 students, 2,000
Yeah.
employees, 5 different colleges, people that have different passions. You know, our people in our music school are as passionate as our people in the athletic department. Our people in engineering are as passionate as about our people in the business school. Um, and to try to create that sense of team, more difficult. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Plus, none of my players ever had tenure, you know, and that's a challenge. And I didn't have any unions on my team. Well, I have 4 unions, and so there's a learning curve there. There's some built-in um, challenges. Um, the solution to them is no different than the solution to your challenges when you're coaching a team. Is that you've got to communicate, and that begins with listening. You've got to spend time together. You've got to learn about one another. You have to respect one another. Um, you have to really believe that um, you're totally insignificant without every other person. So, engineering school, you are insignificant without the rest of us. Now, even though I know that's your passion, athletic department, you are insignificant without the rest of us. Right. We have to believe and respect and be aware of and appreciate one another. And it's people ask all the time, which is more difficult, coaching Ohio State or being a president? It's not even close. I mean, it's so much more difficult because it's so much more complex.
Yeah.
So many more people. We spent a lot of time coaching. I mean, the hours we spent coaching was amazing, but the hours we spend here are times 10.
Wow.
Because there's just so much more to do, so much more to learn, so many more people that you'd like to try to help. I like to live by a simple quote that George Washington tried to keep when he was, commander in chief, and then eventually became the first president of the country. Um, and he didn't have a perfect road. He lost some battles, and he almost got run out of Dodge and the whole thing. But his simple approach to things, where he wanted to listen, learn, and then help. But once he listened, then he learned. Now he knew where he could help. And because the magnitude of where I'm trying to listen, learn, and help is, it's much more challenging.
Yeah, that's really good though. There's so much in there. I hope I kind of want to hit the pause button because I think the first thing that stuck out to me, it takes a great deal of humility on your end to be an elite coach and come into this new role and just have such a thirst for knowledge and a constant desire to learn. I think that's part of us trying to be the best version of ourselves and never arriving. So I hope people understood that. And then I think you said something really key there that I like to follow up on. You talked about different passions. Probably, at least to me, and I had a locker room with 12 to 15 guys, coach. I mean, you had 7, 8 times more than that. And like you said, you have umpteen more than that now. But like, what would you suggest to people that struggle to adapt to all those different personalities? I 12 guys, and they were 12 different guys. They learned differently. They had different personalities once again, or like you said, different passions. So if people are listening to this, whether they're a coach of a team or a head of an organization, how does one get better at that if they struggle like somebody like myself?
Well, let me hit both those things. You talked about that thirst for knowledge. One of the keys, I think, whether you stay in the same position you're doing or the same arena you're in, curiosity to get better is the key to everything. So if you change your arena, curiosity to learn that new world is critical. You can't become a great team. You can't become a great individual. You can't become a great organization without that thirst, for how can we do this better? Um, and then the second part of it was, remind me again, what was the second question?
Well, I just think all the different
Oh, the different
personalities or
personalities.
passions, yeah, that people
Okay,
have within your locker room or your team. That's
right.
that's an obvious thing to me.
So if you think there's a lot of different personalities in a team of 12, try a faculty of 500 tenured faculty members
Right.
who are anywhere from 35 years old to 65. At least the 15 guys were within a couple of years
Right. 18 to
of
22.
their chronological age and their emotional age and so forth. Um, and so it's hard in both cases. And so one thing that we talked a lot about when we were coaching and we talk a lot about here is it's really important if you're trying to create the relationships and you're trying to create that willingness to collaborate and understanding of one another's passions and so forth is we had a little acronym we called WAYT. And it was, what are you thinking? Because it's important to know what the person is thinking. And if you had 100 guys at Ohio State, they were thinking not 100 different things, but there were a lot of different things going through the
Right.
minds. The first stringers thinking different than the
Yeah.
third stringer, the seniors thinking different than the freshman. The guy who's got some things going on at home is, thinking different than the one that, whatever. Um, and so it kind of goes back to that George Washington thing. It begins with listening. And the only way you can be helpful is if you listen and try to grow to understand what someone is thinking. And that's why I know when I worked for Coach Reed at Miami of Ohio, he used to always say, if he ever came in our film room, I was the quarterback receiver coach. And so if he walked into the quarterback receiver coach and I ever did anything other than ask a question, he was going to be disappointed. That I don't want you, you know, diffusing your wonderful knowledge on these kids. I want to know what they know. I want to know what they're thinking. I want to know how they're looking at what you're asking them to do. And so constantly asking questions. The best group I have on campus that it wasn't my idea, but when I got here, they had just started a group called the Presidential Mentors. And the president that was here before me was brand new to the community. No one knew him on campus. Uh, he only ended up staying 6 or 7 months, unfortunately. But so they thought, let's get the students with the new president. So, he learns more about what Youngstown State is all about. So when I got here, they had that group built. So I said, well, that's a good idea. It's kind of like my player councils, or we had different
Right.
committees on our teams and, all those kinds of things. Love learning from the players. That group probably has impacted more of the decision making that I've made here in 7 years
Interesting.
than in any group of vice presidents or faculty or board of trustees or anyone else, because they're living it.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
And to figure out that passion of your 12 guys, the more you know about what they're thinking. And when you're peppering with them questions and you're asking them for their input and you want to know what's important to them, it's amazing what you learn. And I always tell people that there's two things you can learn when you ask for someone's input. One is you can get great ideas. I've gotten the best ideas ever from my players, from my students. And the second thing you can get when you ask for someone's input is you get the opportunity maybe to clarify some thinking, because someone might be thinking something not based upon really the facts or the data or the rationale. And, in fairness to them, no one had ever explained it to them. So
Right.
in their eyes, that wasn't what we should be doing.
Hmm.
So you're either going to get good ideas or the opportunity to clarify things. And what more, can you ask for if you want to progress than great ideas and a commonness of thought?
Yeah, for sure. You've mentioned a couple things already: listening, curiosity, that thirst for knowledge. Over time, what would you say are some of the best qualities, maybe other than some of those that you've seen in exceptional leaders at whatever level, in what other, whether it's a sport, business, whatever, at the university, whatever it might be?
Well, I've always felt that gratitude is critical because it just seems like so often we think, woe is me. And, I remember coming here to Youngstown State 7 years ago, and, the steel industry had left 30 years ago. Um, the demographics weren't great. The poverty level in the region is high, and those kinds of things. And I remember it was constantly a woe is me. And I tried to help them understand that, from my perspective, I come in here and an hour from campus, if you drew a circle, 1 hour around our campus, there's 7 million people.
Wow.
There's over 3.2 million people working, have jobs. There's 34 Fortune 1000 companies. There is more opportunity than you can imagine. But so often we get kind of stuck where we are and lose that gratitude. Um, we used to always make lists of, the big things we don't brag enough about. We have the first museum of American art in the history of the world with almost $1 billion worth of art on our campus. Well, for that person that has a passion for that,
Yeah.
nobody has opportunities like that. We have some of the greatest facilities, the Warner Brothers. You've heard of Warner Brothers
Yep.
movies. Well, the original Warner Brothers Auditorium is 1 block from our campus. They grew up right here. Three seats, 3,000, has great things happening, et cetera, et cetera. We have so many things going on, but if you don't remind yourself of your blessings, you do fall into allowing yourself to think about what you don't have. So I say one thing I would tell you is gratitude. Let's say, Kevin, that you took over a team and they hadn't been doing well, which when we came here in 1986, in the late 70s, they'd done well and then they kind of had fallen off. And so the mentality was we're not that good. Okay. So we decided we were going to build on vivid recall of past successes. And so that was back in the day with film. So you had to slice the film and hang it up and then splice it together and all that stuff. And we put film loops together of our guys doing good things. Now, were there enough of them? No. Did our future highlight films need to have more? Absolutely. But we wanted to build on vivid recall of past successes. Think about our capability of doing it, being thankful that we have that ability, et cetera. So I would say one thing for sure, regardless of the organization you're in or whatever, is carrying that attitude of gratitude. If you don't, I don't think you have a chance. I guess the other one, very difficult, I think, to do, especially in this world where I always say that there's a fierce battle for the human mind. And now you add social media to it,
Yeah.
the weapons just got even more deadly. And that effort to try to build a selfless group of people, to me, if you can do it, or if you can be more selfless than you've been, we're humans. We're never going to be, totally selfless. But are we intentionally working on becoming more selfless, more group oriented, more team oriented, appreciating one another? But if I could pick two things that if we could get better at, um, you know, I think about what's going on in our country right now, and I know we're not perfect,
Right.
but no one in the world has had a positive impact in the history of humankind than what our 200 and some years have in America. But the overriding discussion seems to be all the things that we haven't done well,
Yeah.
which hey, we haven't done some things well, but the impact that we've made in the history of civilization is unmatched.
Yeah. Yeah, for
But
sure.
sometimes we don't think about that.
Yeah. Going back to your coaching days, I mean, you obviously you had amazing teams, coach, winning records galore, national championships. Is there something, and you might have alluded to some of these things already, I would guess, but is there something that consistently sticks out, I would say, to you every time with these teams, or is it different based on the team year to year?
Well, I mean, first of all, I was a head coach for 25 years. I had a lot of good players. We really did. 9 of those 25 years, we played for the national championship. So we had good players. So I don't want to discount that.
For sure.
But lots of people we played had good players too. I don't think that we had uh, just a dominant uh, situation. But I think our teams really grew to love one another and appreciate one another.
That's
Didn't
great.
mean they were best friends. Didn't mean that they agreed with everything. It didn't mean they all hung out together. When you have 100 guys can't hang out together. And that's just the way it is. 12 guys can't hang out together.
That's right.
But company, everybody can't hang out together. But can you grow to appreciate, respect, love, um, root for? Um, and so we were able to build, I think, really good groups. And even in years where we didn't have quite the success that everyone expected us to, uh, sometimes those even ended up being tighter groups because,
Yeah.
the world was against them a little bit. And, but it takes a lot of time to build that kind of closeness. I always like to say that it's exhausting being great.
Yeah.
I mean, it just is. I mean, it takes a lot of time and effort and sacrifice and that selflessness. But if you begin the journey with an attitude of gratitude that, you know what, man, am I lucky where I am? And then you go through the journey trying to do your part as a selfless teammate to the best of your ability. There's always times when, hey, I think I should be playing more. I should be getting the ball more. They need to, feed me, what they do on TV now, which I never saw that until the last, I don't know, 5 or 10 years. But uh, sure, there are times when our selfish interests take over, but intentionally, we've got to pull back on that. Just like as humans in our own family, there's times when, you know, I selfishly want to do something, and you know what? My wife should take the,
Right. Right.
center stage on this one. I get to do or my kids should, or my grandkids should, whatever. But that selflessness is got to be worked on, and and it's hard.
Yeah, 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 for sure. Well, I guess on the flip side, then you had mentioned earlier, like George Washington, in those battles, and I think about my career in athletics as a player and a coach. It's just built so much, the perseverance or resiliency in my life. What would you say? Obviously, you've lost at times. On here we talk about, the church I go to. Everybody has a story and everybody has a struggle, and there's just a great deal of respect I have for both. But knowing that you've lost and you had some struggles on and off the field, from way back when to even now and continually moving forward, what has hardship or failure, what have those things taught you in your life?
Well, I think the greatest lessons that you have while you hate going through them
Yeah,
teach you the greatest lessons. I mean, whether it's personally or professionally.
yeah,
And I remember, I think it's important to have mentors, and I've been lucky to have mentors throughout my life. And I can remember going through some very difficult times and having my mentor say, hey, look, I know it doesn't feel this way right now, but this is going to be the greatest thing that ever happened.
wow,
And I can remember thinking about a game we lost and thinking, you know what, this is going to be the best thing that ever happened to our team. In fact, I remember we were playing 1993 against Illinois State. We had a good team. We were playing terrible. We were playing out there. They were playing really well. In fact, Jim Haycock was their head coach, and later on was on my staff at Ohio State. They were playing us off our feet. It was a close game. I think we were. I think we were down by 3 really late in the game, and I just wasn't. And it was I think it was the next to last game of the year. And I always wanted to be on an upward trajectory as the year was going because we always had playoffs, and you had to be playing better. You know, winning a lot of games at the beginning and then tapering off was always a
Yeah.
formula for unhappiness in playoffs. And I remember it was 4th and 5 on about the 15-yard line. And we could have kicked a field goal to send it in overtime. I said, you know what? We don't deserve to be in overtime. We don't deserve to win this game. Let's see if we can make a 4th and 5. And we didn't. We lost the game 13-10. It was probably, and it was devastating. And I don't remember if we maybe had lost one game. I don't know what we ended up that year, 13-2 or something like that. But anyway, it catapulted us into the playoffs.
Huh.
And made such a difference because we kind of woke us up. Well, adversity, personally or professionally, athletically, adversity wakes you up, and the key is how you handle it. And that's why adversity is good. And I worry a little bit about are we giving our young people enough adversity? Sometimes it feels like we're trying to make everything right, and that won't prepare them.
No.
Because everything's not going to be right.
No.
And so, not that I want to go back and live through some things I lived through.
Right.
But I sure do appreciate and I'm grateful that I lived through them and I learned from them and I'm better for them. And that's what I told our university when this whole pandemic came out. I said, hey, this isn't going to be fun. And in fact, we talked about the old Stockdale paradox, which if you've ever read Jim Collins' book, Good to Great,
right.
It's one of the chapters in there, and it talks about Admiral Stockdale and how he was in a prisoner of war camp for 8 years, the highest ranking military official in U.S. history. And he survived 8 years in the POW camp and was tortured 20 some times. And they asked him, oh, how'd you make it? And he said, I made it by not being optimistic. And that's the paradox. He said, those that were optimistic, that said, you know what, this is going to be over by Christmas, or this is going to be over by spring, or we're certainly going to be out of here by summer, or we're certainly going to be out of here by next fall. He said, they kept getting disappointed. He said, I decided I was going to have an unwavering faith and belief that I was going to get out of here. I was going to see my family again. I was going to get to hug my wife again. But I also decided I didn't know when. So my decision was I was going to make a series of good decisions every day. And however long it took to get out, I wasn't going to put unrealistic expectations. Well, that was kind of the same way when this pandemic hit. I kept seeing things like everyone said, okay, now 15 days, we got to flatten the curve, which I thought, oh no, this is a recipe for disaster because this isn't going to be better in 15 days. Okay, no, we need to go 30 more days and it's going to get better. Well, no, we need to go a little bit. So people kept getting disappointed. And we've had some mental health issues. We've had some anger issues. People have gotten angry about this whole thing. At the beginning, if we would have decided collectively that we're going to make a series of good decisions every day. We're not going to blame each other. We're not going to say each other was right or wrong, whatever. We're going to make a series of good decisions each day, not afraid to change our decision, just like Kevin, you and I have changed our game plan in the middle of a lot of games.
Right.
We saw people doing different things, right? That's how you handle adversity, is you make a series of good decisions every day, and you learn from those difficult times. And is it fun? No. Is it easy? No. Do you wish for adversity? No. Are you grateful you've had it? Yes.
Yeah, I think you said something there. I think about some of the toughest times I've had. Like you said, it was terrible going through it. I'm very fortunate now in my life to be grounded in faith and have those relationships, truth tellers and mentors in my life, or I don't know how I would get through some of those. But like you said, I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't trade it for anything.
And you never know how long it's going to last.
No.
That's where you can't get tricked. You can't say, okay, this was devastating. Uh, oh, I hope I never have to go through this again. But it's not going to immediately get better.
Right. Right.
And that's why making that series of good decisions every day, live daily, and I think you have a lot better chance.
For sure. Well, hey, we'll get into rapid fire here real quick, but I'd be interested. I think one thing that would be really healthy for the listeners, there's coaches, there's bosses, they're constantly getting critique, coach. I mean, as you know that, they're being told what to do, just in general. What advice would you give these people in these positions?
In the positions that they're being told what to do, or the
Well,
bosses?
they're in these positions of leadership, as
Right.
bosses, as head coaches, and I think it's easy for everybody else to critique them because they're not doing it right. So, what's some healthy advice you would continue to give them, or give them as they can continue to go on in these roles?
The one thing and it's hard to do, but is you try to have the people that you're leading or that you're serving, because I think leadership is service, um, to have a lot of ownership in how you're going to go about things, and understand that you're constantly going to be curious as to how to get better. And you have to believe in one another, knowing that the arrows coming in from outside, the data points, the uh, constant evaluation of the experts, whatever, it's going to be there. I remember when we were working for Coach Bruce at Ohio State, and we used to always hate Friday morning meetings during the season because Thursday night was the call-in show. And when the people would call into Coach Bruce's show and complain about something, he would kill us on Friday morning. How come we're not blitzing more? The people are, and that's just, the world that you're in. And just having that ownership with one another, and not being afraid to say, you know what, maybe they're right. Maybe we do need to blitz more. Let's go look at, even though it's some call-in person who's never worn a helmet in their life, don't be afraid to evaluate yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
Don't be afraid to change. And the worst thing you can do is say, hey, this is the way we've done it. This is the way I learned it. We're not changing. One of the greatest things that happened for our faculty this year, they did an unbelievable job flipping over to remote, the whole thing with the mental well-being of our students. It was a difficult time. But a lot of them that were a little bit afraid of technology or didn't realize that there are some ways technology can be helpful, really got a great opportunity.
Yeah.
Broaden out their ability to be effective. And it probably would have never happened without a pandemic.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, one last thing here. You mentioned a couple books already, and I appreciate that because we talk about that on here a lot. You got a best book ever, and maybe more importantly, why that's the best book you've ever read, or just maybe some of your favorites?
Well, the best book ever is the Bible.
Well, right.
And I'm sure that's what everyone says. And let me go with my best author.
Okay.
And that's John Maxwell, good Ohio guy, and he's got a great leadership Bible. He's got 40 or 50 books. He's sold millions and millions of books. I've used books with my team. Every year we would do a book together, and I bet we've used 4 of them. In fact, John even wrote a book about something that our team used to always do. John would be my best author, probably my best author from a sport-related standpoint, who I studied from. In fact, I just gave my part of my collection of his books to a friend of mine that I'm mentoring, was John Wooden, great UCLA basketball coach. He was kind of my coaching encyclopedia, if you will. Most recently, the 2 most recent books that I've read that I think have been wonderful, and that's one thing I would say, read a lot and listen a lot, whether it's podcasts or because you are what you read and you are what you put in your mind. I used to say you are what you read, but now with today's technology and
Mm,
podcasts and all that, uh, but the two that most recently that I really enjoyed was the one I mentioned already, A Time to Build.
yep.
Really impactful, especially had a whole chapter on higher ed, so it was really important for me. Um, and then the other one was Chaos, Call Sign Chaos, and that's by General Mad Dog Mattis.
Okay. Haven't
And
heard of that.
as good a book as I've read on leadership,
Good.
every
All right.
bit as good a book. And but
Well,
you
hey,
can't read.
yeah, this is true. I couldn't agree more. We're gonna kind of go rapid fire, but you take what you will here. 3 pointers. If so, test out your basketball jumper here, Coach. We're shifting on you a little bit.
I was a good defensive player. I couldn't shoot it very well.
Well, that's all right. You filled your role. Hey,
Okay.
number one, if people could learn just one thing from this talk, if you want them to grab hold of something and really hold on to it, what would you want that to be?
Gratitude.
Number two, if you could have stepped into my shoes today and asked Jim Tressel a question that I did not ask, what would have you asked?
I might have asked um, what I see as the future of higher education or the future of sport in America. It might have been a long conversation, but
Good, good. And finally, as we talked about in general, good stuff's the name of this. Just what's some good stuff that you can give us in closing, just in general, anything that you feel would be appropriate.
I think um, I did just finish another book last week, which I'm going to add to the book thing and kind of reminded me when you asked the question. I just finished the book 1776. It was about what went on in 1776. And, you read about the graphics and you read the diaries of the people who were trying to fight for our independence. Uh, and you see what they went through. And, sometimes we're like, oh, this pandemic, this is unbelievable. There's been never anything like this. Well, you know what? This pandemic beats the heck out of what went on in 1776
For sure.
and what people before us did so that we could, uh, I guess, live this lifestyle where just a little pandemic, disrupted us because, granted, we had way too many deaths and sickness and so forth. But to intentionally go and just give up your life for the freedom that we now enjoy,
Yeah.
um, it just reading, middle of the winter, no, haven't changed their clothes for 4 weeks. Their shoes are gone. They just wrapped rags around their feet and they're marching 20 miles. I mean, we unfortunately lost a student athlete in a car accident a week or so ago, and we had a memorial on Wednesday night at the football stadium, and it was snowing and cold, and we stood there for about 45 minutes, and it was cold, and all I could think about was those people in 1776 did that for months with no food, eating snow for water, wrapping rags for their feet. Um, and so, yeah, we've got challenges, but I always like to put things in context. So as your challenges arise, um, I always like to say compared to what?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. That's really good. That's really good. Well, hey, what's in closing here? What's next for Jim Tressel? What does things look like the rest of this year, the next 5, 10 years? What's on the horizon?
Well, this has been a year of pivot in terms of handling the realities of the pandemic and keeping the students and the staff and the faculty's safety number one, but still trying to deliver quality instruction and have quality experiences for our people. So it's kind of consumed us. Um, All the while, we've been trying to continue to build on the things, especially in the areas of student futures and workforce development and research and what world competitiveness and so forth. And so, uh, in the midst of dodging between handling today's realities and tomorrow's challenges, um, it's been consuming. When I came to Youngstown State as president, I told him, I said, at my age, if I stay 3 years, kind of as the president had left after 6 or 7 months, I said, let me get it back on its feet. And here I'm in my seventh year, just flew by, and things do fly when you're trying to learn. Um, and so, I don't know how many years, um, I want to be the president or they want me to be either way.
Right.
It goes two-way street. But I'm kind of like Admiral Stockdale. I'm going to make a series of good decisions each day. And I know the Lord will take me wherever um, I should if I pay attention to him. Now, if I don't pay attention to him, he won't. But,
Right.
And so, I've been blessed, knock on wood, with good health, but I have grandkids now who I don't get to spend enough time to, and I have a daughter who has a farm. So, like, that's like my dream, to go back to my childhood and go into Grandpa's farm, and I don't get quite as much time as I'd like, to do that. So you have to weigh those things, as you go through life. You have to decide, where are you going to invest this single life that you have? And I'm no different than any other human. I don't know the answer,
Yeah.
and that's why I've got to keep going day by day.
Yeah, for sure. That's great. Well, Coach, this was an absolute honor. I've always had the utmost respect for you. I got to tell a really quick story. I once, when I was the head coach at Notre Dame College. I was 25 years old, and I want to say just right after that, you had written your book. And I'm crazy. My wife will say, I'll just go and make the ask. And I remember, I'm like, I need to get my hands on one of these winner's manuals. But I'm thinking, why in the world? This thing's probably sacred to begin with. And why would the coach at Ohio State, let me have that? And so I took a chance. I wrote an email to your secretary. I just, like I said, I really wanted it, but I sent that email. I didn't think really anything of it. It was in the spring, and we went away in July in recruiting like we always had. And just kind of completely forgot about it, to be honest with you. And when I came back, after being gone, I walked into the couch and there was a package sitting on my couch, and I opened that thing up, and that manual was there. It was your manual, with your personalized note on that email. And I'll never forget that. I think that speaks true volumes, to who you are as a core. And so, yeah, thank you for that. And just thanks so much for your time today. I really do appreciate it.
Thanks so much. God bless, and hello to all the viewers.
Yeah, for sure. Well, hey, thanks everybody for listening to another edition of Good Stuff. I'm sure there is a ton in here that you will take and apply to your life. Please continue to stay in touch with us. Until next time, good stuff.